Welcome to The Explainer. If you're a focused learner looking to understand the literal fabric of the internet, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're embarking on a really exciting journey to unpack the absolute beginner's guide to building the web. We're going to go through all the essential HTML tags in detail, complete with examples, and we're making sure this is perfectly tailored just for beginners. And to make these concepts click immediately, we're going to use a pretty simple metaphor throughout this explainer. We're going to learn HTML by building a house. By the end of this, the invisible architecture of the internet is going to start making a whole lot more sense.
But hey, before we start pouring any concrete for our digital foundation, let me ask you a relatable question. Ever wonder what language actually structures the entire web? Think about it. Every single website you visit, from your favorite niche blog to those massive global social media platforms, they all rely on a foundational invisible code that holds absolutely everything together. So what exactly is that invisible architecture running behind the scenes?
Okay, let's dive into this. The answer is HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Now, it's actually absolutely crucial to note that it's not a programming language, like, say, JavaScript or Python. It's a markup language. Its main job is literally just to tell web browsers exactly how to structure the web pages you visit. Think of it as the blueprint. It takes raw text and media and gives it a recognizable shape.
Now, if you actually go looking for HTML tags online, you might stumble across a massive, totally intimidating list of elements. I know exactly what you're thinking. No way, that is a giant, overwhelming cheat sheet. But please, don't panic. The best-kept secret of web development is that you really only need to master about 10 to 15 common tags to build the vast majority of the web. Seriously. So we're going to focus purely on those essential high-impact tools today.
Section 1. The anatomy of HTML. The basic brick.
So before we can even think about framing the walls of our house, we need to understand our most basic, fundamental building block, the HTML element. Every single part of a web page is constructed using these exact elements. Let's look at exactly how a standard HTML element is built. We've got three simple parts here. Step 1 is the opening tag, written with those little angle brackets, in this case a P, which stands for paragraph. Step 2 is your actual content, the text the user will read, like, "My cat is very grumpy." And finally, step 3 is the closing tag. It looks exactly like the opening tag, but it includes a forward slash right before the letter. That forward slash? That is the signal telling the browser, hey, this paragraph is completely done.
Section 2. Setting up the document, the foundation.
All right, so we have our basic bricks mastered. Now, just like laying the concrete foundation of a real house, every single HTML document requires a mandatory underlying structure before you can actually start building the visible rooms. This basic template is widely known as the boilerplate. It always starts with the doctype HTML declaration right at the top, which honestly is just kind of a historical artifact we still need to include to tell the browser to expect modern HTML5. Then we wrap everything in HTML tags. Inside that wrapper, we have two main areas. There's the head, which securely holds all that invisible metadata, style sheets, and your browser tab title. And then there's the body, which holds absolutely everything the user actually sees and interacts with on the screen.
Section 3. Structuring your main content, framing the rooms.
With our sturdy foundation poured, it's time to start framing the rooms of our digital house. We're going to use specific structural elements to carve up the blank, empty page into organized, meaningful spaces. Now, to carve up the page effectively, we really need to understand the two main categories of elements here, block and inline. Block elements are your heavy lifters. They always aggressively start on a new line and take up the full width available to them, creating defined structural sections, much like framing a whole room. Inline elements, however, just peacefully stay right in the regular flow of the text. They only affect specific pieces of content inside those rooms, without breaking the line or pushing text down.
Just look at the visual contrast here. On the left side, we have a raw block of unformatted text. It's just a dense, kind of difficult to read wall of words. But on the right, we see how the browser translates structural block tags. By simply using an H1 heading tag, the text instantly becomes a bold, prominent title. And the P paragraph tags? They create neat, readable blocks separated by comfortable vertical space. The tags are the precise instructions giving the raw text its beautiful form.
Let's rapidly run through our top structural framing tools. We have the div tag, which acts as a fantastic generic container or room divider when absolutely nothing else fits. We've got our standard headings, ranging from H1 as the largest and most critical, cascading all the way down to H6 as the smallest. These provide a crucial structural hierarchy for both search engine bots and your human users. Then we have our P tag for paragraphs.
We can also easily map out data using OL for ordered, numbered lists, or UL for unordered bullet points. These are literally the main structural walls of your web page.
Section 4. Styling with inline tags. Decorating the interior.
Now that the rooms are fully framed and separated, let's confidently transition to the fun part, the interior decorating phase of our build. We've got our large structural blocks in place, now we want to elegantly style and emphasize specific text from within those blocks. Here's a perfect example of interior decorating. On the left, we have our flat, grumpy cat sentence. On the right, we've carefully wrapped a single word, the word very, inside a strong tag. Notice how it instantly changes the formatting to bold, but, and this is key, it absolutely doesn't push the word onto a new line. It stays perfectly within the smooth flow of the paragraph. That is the magic of an inline tag right in action.
Here are the primary decoration tags you should definitely keep in your tool belt. We have strong, or B, for bold text, and M or I for italicized text. We even have the mark tag for cool highlighted text. But I really want to point out a vital distinction here. While the B and I tags just change how things look visually, semantic tags like strong and M actually add real semantic emphasis or importance. This is incredibly helpful for accessibility. Screen readers used by visually impaired individuals will actually change their audible tone of voice when reading those specific words. How cool is that?
Section 5. Attributes and void elements. Special features.
Up until this point, our tags have mostly followed the standard, predictable opening and closing rules. Now, let's introduce the special features of our digital house, tags that operate just a little bit differently. First up, let's clearly define what an attribute actually is. An attribute is simply extra information or custom settings safely placed inside the opening tag of an element. As you can see, it always follows a very strict, reliable format. You need a space after the element name, then the attribute name, an equal sign, and finally the attribute value wrapped securely in quote marks.
So the crucial point is how we actually leverage these attributes to make our pages interactive. Take the anchor tag, represented simply by the letter A. This tag turns ordinary text into a clickable hyperlink. But an anchor tag is completely useless on its own. It absolutely requires the href attribute to specify the actual destination URL it points to. By linking separate pages together using the href attribute, you are literally creating the web in the World Wide Web. Next up, we have void elements. These are kind of the fascinating rule breakers of HTML. Void elements, also sometimes known as empty elements, cannot physically contain any other content, so they only consist of a single tag. They don't need a closing tag at all because they're simply inserting something directly into the document right then and there. A perfect example is the BR tag, which just cleanly forces a hard line break without starting a whole new paragraph.
The most famous and heavily used void element for sure is the image tag, or IMG. Now, to work correctly, it absolutely requires a source attribute, which provides the file path or URL of the image you want to embed. But crucially, and I can't stress this enough, you should always include an alt attribute. This provides a text description of the image. If the image fails to load over a slow connection, or if a user is navigating your site with a screen reader, that alt text ensures your content remains fully understandable and accessible to absolutely everyone.
Section 6. Essential HTML Best Practices. Building Codes.
We've built the structure of our house, but just like building a real physical house in the real world, writing HTML requires following specific safety codes and professional standards to make sure everything functions properly and doesn't eventually, well, collapse under its own weight. When nesting elements, think of it like building a perfect sandwich. The tags must open and close symmetrically. You open your paragraph tag, open your strong tag, then you close your strong tag, and finally close your paragraph tag. Never, ever let your tags overlap. Overlapping tags totally confuse the browser, forcing it to guess what you meant, and that can lead to some really bizarre, difficult-to-fix visual errors.
To keep your code squeaky clean and professional, let's look at a few gold standards recommended by tech giants like IBM. Always write your tags in lowercase to ensure consistency. Always use double quotes for your attribute values. And whenever possible, use semantic tags like header, nav, or main instead of just throwing generic, meaningless div tags everywhere. While modern web browsers try to be very forgiving of sloppy code, sticking rigidly to these strict rules will absolutely prevent frustrating layout bugs down the line. Trust me on this one.
To neatly recap everything we've unpacked in this explainer, let's look at this defining quote directly from the MDN Web Docs. HTML lives inside text files called HTML documents. HTML tells web browsers how to structure the web pages you visit. That is the core thesis to take away today. HTML isn't some complicated magic. It is simply a logical, readable set of structured instructions that gives beautiful, predictable shape to your raw text and media.
You've successfully learned about the anatomy of elements, the foundational boilerplate, the difference between block and inline tags, the power of attributes, and some seriously professional coding standards. So now that you're officially equipped with these basic building blocks, what are you going to build first? I highly encourage you to open a simple text editor right now, start writing out some tags, and see your